Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Naidrich, and I am the co-CEO of AmeriVet Securities. And I am joined, as always, by my partner, all things Fed, liquidity, rates, CFA Gregory Faranello. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Michael.
I'm excited today. We have a great guest today. We're always very fortunate to have some great guests. We have Alan Mittleman with us today, and Alan has a great Wall Street background, but he also now, in the last few years, has transitioned into the crypto Bitcoin space. So, I am excited to learn a lot today, and I always say this, my mom has taught me, when you are with smarter people, let them start the conversation. Maybe I'll jump in somewhere along the line, but Greg, I'm going to pass it to you and Alan. And Alan, on behalf of the firm, we thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Mike. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, you and I have known each other for a long Wall Street career, and I appreciate you coming on today and sharing. I thought we'd start maybe with you sharing with our clients and our viewers a little bit about your background and the SDM business model.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me again, Greg. Appreciate that. My background, I mean, I spent 25 years on Wall Street, trading fixed income and fixed income derivatives, as well as eventually running various fixed income groups. Spent a lot of years at Bear Stearns and Credit Suisse, as well as a couple other European banks. I joined the crypto industry over 3 years ago now at this point. I work for a company called Secure Digital Markets. Our headquarters are in Toronto, but we also have offices in the US and Cayman and Seychelles as well. I like to describe us as a full service OTC digital asset dealer. No different than what, we did on Wall Street at Bear and all the other companies where we make markets in various assets, except these assets are all digital assets or crypto. We trade spot, we trade derivatives, including options. We do lending, borrowing, and we do staking. So like I said, full service, catering to institutional clients, including high net worth and family offices.
So when people talk about crypto in general, it is pretty broad. I mean, what assets, tokens are they really talking about specifically?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. It's like when people say, "Oh, what's the market doing today?" What does that mean, right? Well, probably a lot of people it means, what's the S&P 500 doing? But you could be talking about the bond market, commodities, you name it. So in crypto, I like to kind of separate the crypto assets into four broad categories. And anybody in crypto might say, there should be 12 categories, but four broad categories for the listener base. One, I think of call it the top tier store of value, right? Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the one that has the most institutional adoption and it's the most well known. But that's the one category. The second one I'd say are the other top tier altcoins. And some of those, which a lot of people know, it's, I say Ethereum, Solana, XRP, right? Very well traded, high market caps. And then from there, the third category, which I kind of lump everything together, is called the second tier and below, including these meme coins as well, right? And some of those coins, could be like Pepe or the Trump coin or Fart coin is out there too, which, whatever. But, call it meme coins there as well. And then the final category, which is also becoming more popular, is the stable coins, right? Stable coins being USDC, USDT. They're basically track the dollar one for one. And, just to give people like a sense of these four different categories, the stable coin market, USDC, USDT, I think together has over 200 billion market cap. I think stable coins in general, about 250 billion, versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a 65% market dominance. And dominance in crypto terms basically means out of all the crypto assets out there, Bitcoin basically makes up 2/3 of those, right? Which is about 2 trillion these days. So the total is 3 trillion. Bitcoin's about 2 trillion. And then the other ones are kind of, in between the 250 and the $1 trillion level.
So, Al, you mentioned before, your experience on Wall Street working for, a lot of different firms, interest rate derivatives, options. Is the crypto world that you see that you're in now, Is that similar to what we're seeing with traditional Wall Street firms, or different?
Right. Very similar, and it's getting more and more similar these days, right? I like to think of crypto as I'll say new asset class, although Bitcoin's been around now for over 15 years, right? Since '09. But obviously there's different technology behind it, right? Blockchain technology, which is also being adopted more and more on Wall Street these days, especially for repo activities and instantaneous settlement. But the similarities are this, right? I mean, there exist active markets just like there are on Wall Street, right? As you're trading, treasuries and derivatives and commodities and FX, same markets exist in crypto, right? The spot markets, trades, billions a day. The lending borrowing market, lending borrowing happens under, master loan agreement, right? And people are borrowing dollars against Bitcoin or other coins. The derivative and option market is massive, right? I mean, I tell people who I worked on Wall Street with that, oh yeah, I trade a lot of crypto options at secure digital markets. They're like, you could trade options? And, well, yeah, not only just on Bitcoin and Ethereum, but we trade them on, top 50 coins, right? So I trade options on Doge or Pepe or any of these other ones. And a lot of them are trading, over the counter, right? I trade with my clients over the counter under an ISDA and CSA, just like we did on Wall Street, right? Very similar. Other similarities, obviously we are regulated despite what a lot of people think. We do proper onboarding. You have to do, AML and KYC and, all that stuff that you do on Wall Street. And then the other thing I think that surprises some people is that the specialization in the crypto world is very similar to Wall Street as well. We have specialists that, for vendors, their products include liquidity aggregators or research companies. All they do is digital assets or crypto research. There's, companies that put out OMS and PMS, portfolio management systems. There's compliance specialists, tax strategists. There are auditors. All they do is audit crypto firms or audit protocols as well. Lawyers, the mining industry alone is very specialized. You have companies that all they do is focused on, say, the cooling system of the mining rigs. So anyway, but there's a whole specialist field out there in crypto. And, just to give people a sense too, I mean, there was a couple of weeks ago, there was a big conference, a Bitcoin conference out in Las Vegas, and there was 35,000 attendees, right? So 35,000 attendees, which is massive. Several years ago, had a similar conference to be anywhere from 10 to 20,000. So it is growing, right? It continues to grow.
So we'll stick on Bitcoin, if you will, a little bit here. Obviously, Bitcoin is outperforming clearly, growing, and you're teaching us that. We have a change in administration. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics right now, what's going on in Washington, what it means for Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin is sort of moving ahead of everything else here?
Right, sure. Yeah. So I like to compare Bitcoin to gold, right? They call it the digital gold, right? Which is exactly what it is becoming. I mentioned earlier, Bitcoin dominance is 65%, which to reiterate, right? Out of all the crypto, Bitcoin market cap is 65% out of everything, right? Or 2 trillion. Gold obviously is 23 trillion, I think, last I looked, right? So it's still a fraction of what gold is, call it 10%. The Bitcoin, there's been more and more institutional flow going into Bitcoin for various reasons, right? You mentioned the new administration. Trump obviously is very, very crypto friendly. There's been a lot of, I'll say, frivolous lawsuits that have gotten thrown out. So it's really allowing the industry to grow, mature, but more in a professional, institutional way, which is what, a lot of us obviously want to see. Bitcoin is seen as a store of value, of inflation hedge, hedge against a dollar debasement, right? Which is, as the dollar, obviously, as has weakened recently, and there's talks that, okay, dollar might lose its reserve currency status. Well, if it does, what could take it over? And you think of other currencies out there, and there's really nothing. And you go back to, could be Bitcoin, right? And it's a non-zero probability that at some point in the future, Bitcoin becomes the world's global reserve currency. Institutional adoption's been huge. Corporate treasurers, right? Stockpiling Bitcoin left and right. Last I looked, there was 116 public companies that own Bitcoin, right? And that total amount is, I don't know, 80 or 90 billion dollars, right? It's massive. Obviously the Bitcoin ETFs, which came out, I don't know, 2 years ago at this point. I think last I looked, there's $130 billion in the Bitcoin ETFs, right? And that's just Bitcoin. A lot of the RIAs and financial advisors are now, recommending to their clients they should own, 2 to 5% of their portfolio in Bitcoin. And right now, overall, a lot of people don't own any, right? So anyway, but with all that being said, Bitcoin, I'd say, is like the gold standard. And if people are into or getting into crypto, Bitcoin is definitely like the safest way to start anyway.
Interesting, and it does make a lot of sense. It's definitely it's not a zero probability event going forward, and that's I think that's a great way to put it. What I'd like to end on, and I'm really interested in this, obviously, too, stable coins in general, the potential impact for U.S. Treasuries, obviously deficit spending, who's going to gobble up our supply over time is front and center. So I guess the first part would be, your view on stable coins in general, the potential impact for the U.S. Treasury market currently and over time. And then if you wouldn't mind ending a little bit with, the Fed in general, the FOMC, liquidity, what that means going forward if rates do come down, as the market is predicting, what that means for, the overall liquidity pool for Bitcoin and other crypto.
Sure. Yeah, so stable coins, obviously, their use keeps growing. I think right now, just between USDC and USDT, about 100 billion of stable coins trade every day, right? And like I mentioned earlier, the total market cap of stable coins is 250 billion. And most of these coins are backed by dollar assets, right? Most of them are treasuries. I think USDC, USDT combined own over 200 billion of treasuries, either directly or indirectly. I think it's like 125 billion directly, and then indirectly, meaning through investments in money market fund or repo. So it's massive, right? And obviously they're buying a lot of short-dated paper,
Right.
bills especially, or 1 year and in. So it has a huge impact and on the demand there. And obviously with the supply that's keeps increasing, it's obviously soaking up that as well, which is nice to see. In terms of stable coins, though, like it makes for an efficient transfer of value or an efficient transfer of money across, globally. Some people I talk to say, oh, yeah, but if I want to move money, I could send Venmo, I could use Zelle, right? You name it. I'm like, well, that's fine in the US, but even if you want to send money to people in Canada, right? Like they don't take Venmo, right? They don't take Zelle up there, right? And you would think, what? Well, why not? But it's just not a thing. They can't accept it. So, but stable coins, you push a button, it's cheap, it's efficient, instantaneous settlement, and the stable coins hit up in the other person's wallet pretty much instantaneously. In terms of your last question, though, the FOMC coming up, obviously I don't expect too much out of this one other than maybe some clarity on future guidance. But like any, call it alternative asset or most assets, the easier the money supply is and the more the Fed is, eventually going to lower rates, the better it is for all assets, especially alternative assets, including crypto. So, I'm bullish on crypto, part of it for that reason, but part of it is bullish on Bitcoin anyway, because even if the Fed doesn't lower rates, like just say inflation's high, due to tariffs, what have you, Bitcoin has been acting as a safe haven asset, right? It's not dissimilar to gold and or a dollar debasement story overall. So overall, very bullish on Bitcoin, but bullish on the crypto industry.
Yeah, thank you for that, Al. I appreciate it. Mike, I'm gonna kick it back to you.
Yeah, this has been absolutely fascinating. Obviously follow a lot of this in, the press, and obviously with the administration being more crypto friendly, really paying attention. But when you hear some of the stats that Alan throws out, it becomes really, kind of becomes very crystallized on just how real this space has continued to become and how it's really not going anywhere. It's going to be around for quite some time, if not forever. And I think the days of the blue tulips reference is long gone when it comes to crypto. So,
That's right.
you know,
Like I said, it has been around 16 years now, which, it's, all right.
yeah, I laugh if I tell you where I got introduced to Bitcoin. I probably wouldn't be on this call if I would have just bought $1,000 worth. And I think about all the flyers in my life I've taken, but this has really been fascinating. And Alan, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. Gregory, I say this every time, but it's been for a long time. These meetings are extremely important. That's coming up on Wednesday. We have a short week with the holiday and stuff. So I think, tomorrow probably busy in the debt markets. And I think, from there, I think Alan's right. The guidance on where they give in the presser and the minutes are always probably more important than the actual event. So, we'll see where it heads from there. We'll see. I just think that clarity is good, and we haven't had clarity in a while with all the cross currents and geopolitical. So let's hope we get some clarity moving forward. So thank you, Alan. Appreciate you.
Great. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Al.